Imagine that all the signs that you saw on the roads as you were coming here, every book that you grab, every magazine, every product in the supermarket looked like this to you. It's hardly unimaginable for us to think that we could not read or write. It's an integral part of our development. It's an integral part of our education. Without it, we cannot grow personally and professionally. Literacy, that ability to string words together into thoughts, to be able to read them, to write them, to share them with others, is intrinsical to our development as persons, as professionals. It opens horizons for us. It expands our horizon. It allows people to discover new worlds, to travel, to be inspired by poetry, by literature, and it's something that society cannot thrive without. In spite of that, there are millions of people around the world that cannot read or write. Half of these women, 6 years or 7 years ago, could not read or write. They are professional weavers in Guatemala. And they took it upon themselves to teach themselves with other people and students to read or write. And that has empowered them in ways that you cannot even imagine. But I want to talk on that. That's a world problem, the literacy issue. But I want to talk about another type of literacy that probably we suffer a little bit of that in this room, in this community, in this country, which is the inability to read the natural world. To be able to recognize the elements, the species, the ecosystems, the habitats, the interrelations between them and us is an ability that we have lost a little bit at a time. And we feel impoverished, or we should feel impoverished, by not being able to read the natural world this way. Because without that, without the capacity to interpret the natural world, to be able to make sense of it, we cannot develop the habits and the behaviors that would allow us to coexist with this natural world and measure the type of impacts that we can cause to them. So bioliteracy is essentially the ability to understand the language of life, and that is a form of literacy. But bioliteracy, in its most basic element, is to read that language, to know the species and so on. But it also has another component that is equally important, which is the process of experiencing nature and learning that language from the direct experiences. It's that direct experience, that time that we spend in nature, what will allow us to truly understand that language and be able to use it and incorporate it into our lives, as opposed to watching nature shows on TV, which is another forum to get that knowledge, but it's not the same as being outdoors. The experiences in nature, and this is from my own experiences and many of you as well, is what is going to allow you to develop that personal relationship with it. And with that personal relationship, often that leads to better behaviors, to the development of an environmental ethics, and choice that you make, the choices that you make, of how you're going to relate to that. And hopefully that will make you better citizens in the future. I'm going to talk about give you two examples, very short, about bioliteracy that I have been involved with. The first one is this one, the biological education program. It started about 30 years ago in the northwestern part of Costa Rica, in a brand new national park at that time, the Guanacaste National Park. And in that program, children from the local schools, from the region, 4th, 5th, and 6th grades mostly, will go to the park, accompanied with their teacher, by their teachers, or by naturalists and some parents, and have experiences. You just go walk in the park, walk in nature, with guides, with biologists sometimes, or natural history guides. And just learn by encountering things. So we'll go 6, 7 times a year after year during those 3 years. So multiple touches, not just going out to the park and having one experience. This was continuous, different seasons, different times. And these were the animals and the plants and the ecosystems they grew up with. This is part of their backyards, but they were learning to read them in forms that they could not do by themselves. This was part of what we call the Biocultural Restoration effort. We were restoring the natural environment that had been degraded for many decades, even close to a century, but also restoring the connection between the people that live there now, or then, and this environment. The idea was that as his children grew up with this new knowledge and this new relationship, they could make better decisions as adults. In 30 years, we had 3 generations. Those children that started the program are now parents and have children of their own. Some of them are teachers in the program. Others are farmers, or they are business people, or they are government people. And the changes that these experiences and growing up with that have made in their ability to make better decisions is notable, and it's noticeable in that area, particularly in what it becomes the protection of that environment by themselves. The other program is a little bit younger. It's only 25 years old. And it was an office that I ran for the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Environmental Management Office. And in there we did many projects. We had a pretty big area to cover. And my office just worked on environmental management, which is a broad term. And it means that we did environmental impact studies. We did all kinds of work with the communities and help researchers and did many things. One of the things that we decided to do is to bring information to the schools. These are an example of some of those schools, very rural schools. Some of them were dirt floor, single teacher, 25, 30, 40 kids, and no materials whatsoever. So we decided to bring materials, information to them. We had 142 schools, 300 teachers, 10,000 students. Big population. And we designed a school library, 26 books, 5 posters of different ecosystems of Costa Rica, and the plants and animals that lived in there, a map, and gave them to every single one of those teachers. Every school got it. Every teacher had their own library, and they could do with it what they wanted. Okay? Part of that library was a couple of publications that we produced, guides, field guides to aquatic organisms and things, and this magazine, a magazine that had stories about plants and animals of that region, and people that worked on those, and conservationists and the like. And that was given to all of the teachers, and they have. Every student also got a little packet of information. There are 10 little booklets, coloring books with a little box of crayons that they could take home, about the forest, about animals, about conservation, about agriculture, and things like that. 10,000 kids, 10 little books, that's 100,000 little booklets. I call that saturation. Everyone got it. Whether you were ready to absorb it or not, you could not make that decision ahead of time. We just wanted that the opportunity was there for everybody. If you were ready, you had it. If you were not ready, you tossed it, okay, that was your choice. But if you were ready, you could have it. Now let's move. These are some examples of the pages of one of those. Move 25 years to about a month ago. I'm in the La Selva Biological Station. I'm receiving a course in biology from the University of Costa Rica. These are 4th-year students. They're about to graduate. And one of the students, very shy, comes to me, "Can I talk to you, Don Carlos?" I said, "Come on, talk to me. What is it?" And he said, "I just wanted to share something with you. When I was 4 years old, my dad, who was a teacher in a little rural school, would bring home a magazine, a couple of them, that he would bring home, and he would read me the stories about the animals, about the birds and some insects, and the little poison frogs that carry the tadpoles on their back. And I was just enthralled with those stories, so much that I kept the magazines and I kept reading about them, and I decided later in my life when I went to school that I wanted to be a biologist, that I was going to study biology. And here I am, 4th-year student in biology, and I wanted to thank you for opening up. I know now that you published those magazines and wrote most of them, and thank you for that. All right, I'm getting, by this time, goosebumps, okay? It's just like, my gosh, it's just really touching. And then he opens the backpack and pulls out 2 of these magazines out of the backpack, all yellowed and dog-eared, and says, "Could you sign them for me?" Who keeps a magazine for 25 years, okay? Yeah. So this was, if this was a type of impact that program, one of many programs we did, could have had in the life of one person, what impact could have had in an entire population of 10,000 children, 300 educators, and their families, because this stuff went home with them. So what did we learn from this? Where am I? Okay. So we learn a couple of things from this. The first thing I learned is that books matter. If I ask you, I asked a class a couple of days ago here, 2 courses that I gave a lecture. Please raise your hand if you do not have a cell phone. Anyone here doesn't have a cell phone? Doesn't use a cell phone? Doesn't use a computer? No hands. We are a technological generation. We all have access to the world of information. Google anything. Ask Siri. Anything you want, you can get right now through electronics. But in the areas where the most grievous environmental impacts are happening, where the deforestation is rampant, where the pollution, the poor areas of the world that need information the most, they don't have this access to this technology. They might have cell phones, but they don't use them for talking or texting. They don't use them for reading books. So books do matter. The printed materials do matter. If somebody in Costa Rica, which is highly developed already, is willing to keep a piece of information in print for 25 years, it has serious value, and we should then use more of that. It's our mechanism to reach an audience that still has not reached the levels of technology that we are accustomed in here. The other lesson is that the experience itself is essential. It's not just the information. If that kid has not gone out and learned from the nature as well, if those children did not learn from their experience, that personal connection could not have developed. These experiences are formative. And if you have them from your childhood on, you can't help it. You're going to grow up with a different perspective about that natural world. And that is important when you become an adult and are making decisions for yourself, your family, or your country. The other lesson is this is not just for children. Children are primed for learning, and they're the best canvas to paint this new world that we want to have of respect, environmental ethics, and the like. But the adults need it as well. And we had adults in the programs, the teachers, the parents that receive this material. The kid comes home with 10 little booklets, and it's like, what is all that? And they weren't reading that stuff too. The adults need bioliteracy as much as the children do, because they can change their behaviors as well if they have better information. We need bioliterate government officials. We need bioliterate people that make decisions. We need people in industry that have that knowledge, that connection to nature. If we want to get that balance that we all that we all like to have right now. The individual that is bioliterate, that has that language and can use that language, has the capacity to develop that environmental ethics that many of us have, but that is badly needed in the world. And nature will acquire a different set of value to them. It acquires a personal value. It's a personal connection. It's not something in a book. Yeah, this is a great book, but it's your experience what is going to give you that personal connection. And then that could lead to being better protectors, better stewards of the natural world on which we depend. We forget that we really depend on the natural world more than we think. We forget that connection. If you go 2,000 years back and you look at the native communities, the forest, the nature was everything. It was their hardware store, it was their supermarket, it was their pharmacy, and for many tribes there still is. It was their church, their park. All of those things were given by the forest. And we forget that we still depend on the forest and nature for many of those things. We're just a couple steps removed, and we have lost that connection. We lost the language. We lost the words that connects us to that. So sustainable development, which is the theme of this event, I believe we cannot achieve it without that language. It's like trying to write a book without knowing how to read or write. And it's only with this understanding, this appreciation, this respect for nature that we can then begin to design the strategies for development that look for a balance, not just a profit, but the balance between our society and the natural world that surrounds us. I truly believe that our own existence in this planet depends on finding that balance. And bioliteracy is one of the tools that we need for that. Thank you.